Thank you so much for joining us. This webinar will begin in just a few moments. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Next slide, please. So welcome to our webinar on public sector apprenticeships. My name is Erica Manuel, and I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the Institute for Local Government, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. I am so excited to be with all of you today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes and disclaimers showing on this next slide. All of your lines have been muted for the duration of this session, but you can ask a question at any time just by typing it into this Q&A box that should be on the right-hand side of your Zoom screens. Anything you put in the Q&A box is directed only to panelists and hosts, so we will see your questions, but the rest of the audience will not. One other thing we do at ILG is enable anonymous questions because we understand that some issues can be sensitive, and we want you to feel comfortable asking whatever questions you may have for us. We do have time set aside for Q&A today at the end of our session and throughout if we can, but you can certainly put your questions in at any time. We will try to take as many as possible during the time that we have. And if you have any technical difficulties during this session, you can also feel free to use the chat function to our co-hosts and panelists, and one of our session coordinators will definitely assist you. So we are recording today's webinar, and we're going to share that recording and any of the related resources and materials that we have with all the registrants following the webinar today. And we do hope that you will share this information with your friends and colleagues in local government as well. Next slide, please. So before we dive into the panelist presentations, I do want to tell you a little bit about the Institute for Local Government. As I mentioned during my intro, my name is Erica Manuel, and I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the Institute for Local Government. We are nonprofit, we are nonpartisan, and we are here to help local government agencies. We are the training and education affiliate of 3 statewide associations representing local governments: the League of California Cities, CSAC, and the California Special Districts Association. Together with all 3 of those affiliates and partners, we serve over 2,500 local agencies, and that's cities, counties, and special districts up and down the state. Everything we do at ILG is really centered around helping local government leaders like yourselves navigate the complexity of your roles. And we do that by providing practical and easy to use resources so that you have the opportunity to effectively implement policies on the ground. Next slide, please. We have 4 main program areas, or what we call our pillars of work, and they're showing on your screen right now. Our session today is focused on workforce development and civics education. At ILG, we really believe that in order to have this healthy democracy that we all know and love, we have to have strong local governments. We need well-trained staff, we need great leaders, and they all have to have a solid understanding and a commitment to public service. So in the pillar of work we do around workforce and civics education, we help make sure that local agencies have a strong pipeline of current and future leaders, and that those that are already serving, that are already working in local government, have the right pathways to thrive. So we provide education and training, technical assistance, capacity building, and convenings around key issues that is related to this work. Issues like what you might ask, I think you know why we're here today. We're talking about some challenges and opportunities that we have in local government. And the next slide speaks a little bit about that. After more than 2 years of COVID protocols and continuous cycle of crisis management that I think you're all feeling the local government level, so many local government agencies are now facing this different kind of crisis, right? We've reached this post-pandemic, intra-pandemic phase, and it's a workforce crisis. The pandemic rally, I think it unearthed a lot of issues that are not exclusive to local governments, but I think it's unique to local government in the way that they are manifesting. For example, we know that remote and hybrid work policies are changing the public sector workplace. We know that health and safety is still really top of mind for a lot of employees, certainly mine, and I know yours as well. We know that burnout is real, and the divisiveness and the polarization in our halls of government can have an effect on our employee retention, our employee satisfaction, and our recruitment, right? We also know that the public sector salaries are really challenged to compete with the private sector, and that the salaries combined with the work-life balance we were just talking about, those priorities can really tip the scales even more when you consider how much inflation right now especially is impacting our checkbooks. So we know that public sector needs to think about these topics, and they also need to think about things like equity and inclusion. It's so important, and we need to find ways to improve our local government staff rosters. So one of the things that we need to do is look at some statistics, right? And these might be familiar. Look at the one on the screen right now. It says that according to the Department of Labor, most state and local governments nationwide collectively are operating with 700,000 fewer workers than they had pre-pandemic. We also know in most cases, especially at the local government level, that service loads have increased because of the pandemic. We also know that the current average age for public sector employers is 45 years old, which means we have an aging workforce that's going to be difficult to replace. The good news is that the benefits offered by the state and local governments, like on the next slide, will show you that we have always had a huge selling point that can attract and retain workers even amidst the Great Resignation. The fact remains that nearly 70% of cities, counties, and special districts are struggling with limited hiring pools, record level resignations, and turnover. And training the next generation to lead is something that everyone across the board is struggling with, and we need to figure it out. And that is literally why we are here today. At ILG, we know that local governments need solutions. We haven't experienced, I think, socioeconomic landscapes like this before, and we'll need innovation and creative thinking to tackle it. Today's webinar is focused on apprenticeships as a possible solution. We're going to discuss how registered apprenticeships can maybe work in your local agency. You're going to learn whether this new workforce development model that is designed to really attract and retain public sector employees is actually a good fit for you. We are super excited to partner with the California Department of Industrial Relations on some of the content today, and we are grateful to have a phenomenal panel to give you some real-world insights that are really tailored to the local government sector. As you heard, our organization focuses on cities, counties, and special districts exclusively. We are nonprofit and we are nonpartisan, and we want to help you find solutions that move the needle in your agency. And so our conversation today will be a candid one that really connects some of the issues that are affecting you specifically. Our goals for today are fourfold. We want to share information about this new apprenticeship program, and we know there might be some concerns and maybe some misconceptions about apprenticeships, so we want to discuss those, and we want to provide answers if we can. We also want to understand some of the key issues impacting you as a public sector employer. I'm going to be moderating today's session, and I'll be monitoring the chat for your feedback and your insights throughout, and we hope to hear from you through that forum. And lastly, we really do want to connect you to apprenticeship resources and to support and to funding, because having a conversation, which is really important, and it's great, it's good, but at ILG we also like to see great implementation and success stories as well. So we want to help get you there, and if apprenticeships are the right fit for you, we'd love to connect you to those people and those places and those resources. So let's get to our panel presentation. I am humbled and honored to actually share this virtual webinar stage with an all-star panel of subject matter experts this morning. We have four it's not a morning anymore, technically it's afternoon. We have four panelists, and they're actually from three distinct areas related to our topic. We have two representatives from the California Department of Industrial Relations, DAR, to explain the apprenticeship program to us. We have Kelly Mackey, she's the State Director of Strategic Partnerships, and Laura Thompson, who is the Strategic Business Consultant. We also have a local government representative in Carrie Harmon. She's from Riverside County, and we are pleased to round out our discussion with Sarah McGinn. She's representing SEIU Local 1000 as their apprenticeship coordinator. Our webinar today is going to start with a presentation by Kelly and Laura, and then we'll have a full panel presentation with the whole group. And I hope that you will join me in welcoming all of our panelists. Now, before we turn it over to Kelly and Laura, let me tell you a little bit about each of them. Kelly Mackey is the State Director of Strategic Partnerships for the DAS Apprenticeship and Workforce Innovation Unit. Kelly leads the statewide effort to identify registered apprenticeship opportunities across multiple sectors, including information technology, healthcare, business services, and the public sector. Kelly has an incredible track record for establishing many of California's new registered apprenticeship programs, and we're so glad that she's here. Thank you, Kelly. And Laura Thompson is a strategic business consultant for the DAS in the Apprenticeship and Workforce Innovation Unit. Laura assists and develops apprenticeship programs across the non-traditional sectors, but mainly in the civil service and public sector space. So this is perfect for our conversation today. These two have a great presentation to give you about the nuts and bolts of the program. So while I transition these slides to our panelists, if you are just joining us, just a note and a reminder that all participants will be on mute during this presentation. I do see that the chat is already active, and we're grateful for that. If you do have questions for our panelists during the webinar, make sure to type those questions into the Q&A box at any time during the session. We will work throughout the discussion to review all those questions and determine the best time to ask them during the session. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. If you put them into the chat box, we may not get them over to the Q&A, so please make sure to drop them into the Q&A. That we'll do our best to monitor both. And at this time, I'm grateful to turn it over to our team at the Department of Industrial Relations and the DAR.
Thank you so much, Erica. And I want to take a moment just to acknowledge the Institute for Local Government for co-hosting today's event and the opportunity to talk to the stakeholders who are participating in today's Zoom meeting. First of all, one of the things that I want to emphasize is that change does not happen without leadership at the top. We are very fortunate to be led by our current administration, specifically our governor, who has, over the course of the last 4 years, really championed registered apprenticeship programs. And that really was designed to help employers be successful in getting the skilled workforce that they need, but also to provide viable career employment pathways for workers in the state, many of whom who are just looking for a chance. Our governor, as a candidate, ran on this big, bold vision of developing 500,000 registered apprentices by the year 2029. We are about 1/5 of the way there, and through the course of the last couple of years, we have made significant progress in attaining that goal. But again, that doesn't happen without the leadership of a governor like Governor Newsom to really support the infrastructure necessary to develop these programs. So one of the things that we know is critical in the development of registered apprenticeships is that resources need to be available for employers. And as a part of that effort, in 2018, we took our division, which had historically been focused on servicing building and construction industry programs, and essentially bifurcated the division to set up a separate strike team of subject matter experts in the Apprenticeship and Workforce Innovation Unit to work side by side with employers throughout the state to develop emerging, innovative, non-traditional registered apprenticeship programs. Erica alluded to it. These are sectors like information technology, healthcare, biotech, logistics, financial services, insurance, and our public sector. As a part of that effort, we sought to hire and bring in talented staff who are really doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the development of these programs. As you can see on the slide, part of this effort involves taking those consultancy services and really drilling down on what's needed for employers. First and foremost, partnering with them to understand their current business needs, and that is from a recruitment and retention perspective. As a part of the registered apprenticeship model, you're going to learn that the critical infrastructure not only involves on-the-job training with employers, but it also involves a partnership with local education agencies. Again, we are really really about identifying where the gaps are within those employment settings. And that means zeroing in on the critical in-demand roles that are difficult to fill. Discovering a talent pool. One of the other areas that we focus on, and all of the work is done through the lens of ensuring that we provide equal access to bring in underserved populations so that the workforces within our great state reflect the great diversity of California. And so that is part of the broader effort to help employers diversify and really bring in their talent pipeline. One of the other notable distinctions, and I'm going to talk about it more extensively on another slide, is the access to funding by developing a registered apprenticeship program. It is a separate and distinct process from like an internship or a training program, which in many cases does not offer you the same significant funding opportunities. Streamlining the approval process has been one of our biggest priorities to ensure that as employers are looking to launch their programs very quickly, we are in turn mirroring those priorities by changing the internal infrastructure within our own operations to ensure that that approval process happens quickly so that they can deploy their programs. And then as a part of the registered apprenticeship model, there are additional partnerships that can be integrated into the program to really strengthen and fortify the model to ensure that employers are getting all of the resources that they need. For those of you who don't know, the state of California is the national powerhouse in registered apprenticeships. In fact, we have 5 times the number of registered apprentices as the state with the next highest total. As you can see, we are climbing and inching ever so closely to just under 100,000 registered apprentices. We have roughly 377 registered pre-apprentices. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Currently, we have about 36,000 participating employers that span both the public and private sector. We have just north of about 1,200 training programs statewide, currently about 300 active educational partners that include the K-12 system, community colleges, adult schools, county offices of education, and our 4-year colleges and universities. And then on average, we graduate roughly 8,000 registered apprentices every year. Over the last 4 years, as I mentioned, we have been focusing heavily on really identifying employers within sectors that are struggling to fill these critical in-demand roles. This is a snapshot, it does not include all of them, of some of the partnerships that we've developed with both public and private sector entities. As you can see, they run the gamut. They are entities within information technology, consumer services, business services, healthcare, logistics, our public sector arena. The thing that we're seeing across the board is that they're speaking the same language, and that is this really intense need to ensure that they have a skilled workforce to meet the demands of their customers and stakeholders now and in the future. With this particular portfolio of employers that we've partnered with come a number of different occupational tracks. They range anywhere from allied healthcare occupations to critical in-demand IT roles like help desk and networking, cybersecurity, mainframe systems administration. We also have roles like pharmacy technicians. We have roles that range in the logistics space. We have one of the largest wineries in the world, Ernest and Julio Gallo, focusing on production. Again, that list goes on, including accounting roles and insurance. As I said, this is a snapshot. It does not include all of them, but it gives you a window into some of these industry giants and their priority of leaning in on developing and deploying a registered apprenticeship model to meet the needs of their customers and to build their 21st century resilient, diverse workforce. Here is an example and an illustration, again, a snapshot, it does not include all of them, of some of the academic partners who are integral to the development of registered apprenticeship programs. I'm going to talk about that in a moment on the next slide about what that model looks like. But as you can see, again, there's a large array of local education partners, K through 12 system, county offices of education, community colleges, and then of course our four-year colleges and universities. One of the things that I wanted to focus on today were the unique challenges that really are keeping our HR shops up at night. I currently work in the public sector space, and as do you. And I think what we're seeing, whether it's a local government, a city, a county, a municipality, a special district, the judicial system, or the state of California, we are all struggling with some of the same barriers. The first, of course, is the hiring structure for moving into public sector work. In the state of California system, we have a mechanism by which someone takes an exam, they get placed on a list, and then they're hired in that fashion. Our local governments, in many cases, mirror that structure. And then once an employee is hired within a public sector arena, there's a structure that can be somewhat rigid in terms of their ability to pivot or move up. And one of the things that the apprenticeship model has done within our public sector space is afford individuals to belie and really blow up that current infrastructure by really moving up into higher paying, in demand, good jobs through the registered apprenticeship model. The next, of course, is the high vacancy rate and the shortage of skilled talent. It's not uncommon to hear from local governments, as is the case with the state of California, that we are really vying for talent and competing against our private sector counterparts. The lack of parity in wages and the ability for them to hire quickly and easily and seamlessly has really created a vexing issue for us within our public sector space on how we can compete and successfully retain that talent. Succession planning is very difficult in an ever-changing climate, and that's one of the things I think many of our public sector partners have really felt, and that is that we don't have that nimble agility to do the kinds of things that they can do in the private sector. The recruiting and access to underserved communities also is something that is a priority for all of us, and as is the case with our private sector counterparts. And because of the structure for onboarding and hiring public sector employees, it's very difficult to sort of micro-target individual types of candidates. And so it has put us at a disadvantage to target veterans, underserved populations, including women of color, our disabled populations, dislocated workers. The apprenticeship model can really address that challenge in part. Again, as I mentioned, vying for our private, competitive components of competing with our private sector counterparts, occupations that differ from the current relevant job titles. As the state of California recently did a massive undertaking on class consolidation, we did it with an eye toward creating continuity within our state departments, but we also did it with a goal of really changing antiquated, outdated occupational titles, so that if I'm a private sector person and I covet a role in the public sector arena, I can do a search by the things that I know that I can search for in the private sector, cloud computing and some of the sort of technology forward roles that don't often appear when searching on a public sector career platform. Outsourcing is also necessary for skilled work. And really, this is really about growing your own and really not leaning in on outsourcing. It can cost public sector entities billions of dollars, and in many cases when they're just immediately turning to an outsourcing solution versus really growing their own. And you could, as a public sector entity, save millions and millions of dollars by simply turning to your own incumbent workforce or attracting those individuals who covet roles in public sector employment, but simply don't have the skill sets and can be quickly trained to fill those roles. And then again, the last part of this, of course, is the lack of familiarity with this sort of robust, time-tested, gold standard model that other countries have been using for centuries, and increasingly states across our nation are utilizing both in the public public and private sector arena in some of these non-traditional sectors. Many of you are familiar with the internship structures. It's something I often see, certainly in our private sector work and working with employers. And one of the things that they ask me is, we've got an internship structure that's very robust and it seems to be serving us. Why would we look to a registered apprenticeship model to compete with it or to take it away? And my answer is, please take a look at this slide. First and foremost, one of the things you're doing is you're really cultivating your talent. You're embedding a model that allows you to cultivate that talent now and in the future. The length of training tends to be much more robust. It's indoctrinated into your organization, which allows for an individual to really live and breathe your space, understand what you do, your DNA. You start to get this sort of cultural fit and allow for an individual, when thinking about upon successful completion of the program, to really look at an organization that they've grown to feel invested in. The compensation piece is also noteworthy. Many of the individuals who are looking to move into these coveted roles cannot afford to go unpaid or to have a stipend or a negligible amount of compensation. Many of our apprenticeship programs, in fact, the vast majority of them, compensate individuals at anywhere from 40 to 70% of that high-skilled worker wage. The supportive partnerships feature is also really compelling. We are problem solvers and we also are linkage providers. We bring in all of those supportive partnerships that include community-based organizations, apprenticeship intermediaries, and others, some of which I'm going to outline in just a moment. In the case of an internship, it's the employer or the academic institution alone, and sometimes just the employer. The credentialing piece is also very attractive, not only from an employer perspective, but from an individual who is going through the program. The vast majority of our registered apprenticeship programs, especially with those that offer and lean in hard on credentials, digital badging, certifications, are built into the registered apprenticeship model. College credit is also a significant advantage. Many of our registered apprenticeship programs see graduates of the program also graduating with an AA, and in some cases, depending on the role, a four-year degree like a bachelor's degree. And then finally, the funding piece, which is perhaps one of the most compelling from an employer perspective, and that is there is an unprecedented level of funding being directed both at the federal and state level that affords employers to tap into these dollars to help build out and offset those operational costs associated with the implementation of their program. And we are, again, facilitators of linking you to those funding streams. Here, in a nutshell, is the registered apprenticeship model. It consists of a two-pronged process, which is effectively a theoretical component that combines related and supplemental instruction, which is basically classroom or curriculum, and then it is complemented by competencies that are performed on the job. We require at least one employer, one local education agency, and at least one apprentice. The vast majority of our registered apprenticeship programs are duly registered with both the United States Department of Labor and the state of California. This is particularly strong and an incentive for a lot of our employers and compelling because it affords them to open up opportunities for both federal and state funding. And it also provides a portable credential for that apprentice, both at the state and federal level. We've also developed a template that allows programs to simultaneously register with both governmental entities at one time on one document. We also have three types of models. One is a competency-based program, which is the vast majority of our non-traditional apprenticeship programs develop competency models, which allow for the program to be built around the specific modalities that are required to secure mastery of those positions. And then the other is a hybrid, which combines both the competency, and then a time-based model, which is the last, which is traditionally the kind of model that is seen in our building and construction industry. And then finally, in terms of wages, the employers set the wage. So if there's a CBA in place, that will always dictate the wage structure. We do require that at least one progressive wage increase be afforded an apprentice at some point during their apprenticeship program. And that is true with the exception of a CBA where you have a prescribed built-in collective bargaining agreement that dictates those wages. I mentioned previously on another slide about the various components that can be built in to create a really robust registered apprenticeship model. The first is an intermediary. One of the strengths around intermediary support is the idea that you can have a partnership with an entity that can facilitate a lot of the sort of additives, outreach, recruitment, assessment, administrative oversight, back-end compliance. A lot of those different programmatic components can be supported by a strong intermediary. The employment training panel is something that is typically not afforded to public sector entities, but could be afforded to other stakeholders that are built into your structure, like NGOs or other types of partners. Community-based organizations have been really instrumental in helping many employers build a diverse pipeline, really focusing on their targeted populations and partnering with our employers to help them really create an on-ramp for those certain populations. Again, I mentioned the just inordinate amount of funding being funneled in right now. I'm going to talk more specifically about those specific funding streams later in the presentation, but just in a nutshell, they consist of grants, dollars in the budget, and then of course philanthropic organizations that are heavily invested in supporting registered apprenticeship, including the organizations like the Irvine Foundation or the Gates Foundation, both of whom we partner with frequently. Local workforce investment boards have their finger on the pulse in their respective regions. They are also an integral partner in this process and have been certainly heavily involved in a recent $10 million grant that we just awarded to some WIBs throughout the state of California who are looking to partner with entities throughout California, including public sector partners to help support that infrastructure. And then the Community College Chancellor's Office, which is a huge funding partner that I can talk about on another slide.
Thank you, Kelly. This is Laura. I actually wanted to talk with you a little bit about pre-apprenticeship and go take a deeper dive into some of the nuts and bolts of apprenticeship. First of all, pre-apprenticeship is a set of strategies. It's a program for individuals who want to enter into registered apprenticeship programs. It actually lasts either from a few weeks to a few months, and it does include either a wage or a stipend or none at all. It's not required to include those. It does require, however, that there's a linkage agreement to at least one registered apprenticeship program. The objective is to actually prepare them for that program or the programs. However, there is not guaranteed entry for those apprentices. But again, it's something that the registered apprenticeship program advises on how best to prepare those apprentices for their best chances at entry. And 2 specific certifications can be included in a pre-apprenticeship. Courses could be included. There could be a lot of things loaded into that pre-apprenticeship, as long as they're not doing the same skills as they would be in the apprenticeship for that particular occupation, for the apprenticed occupation, the target. Oh, goodness. Please forgive me. One of the programs that we do have presently is the CCHCS and SEIU Local 1000 LVN to RN apprenticeship program. It is actually the first of its type in the nation, and we want to give this example for good reason. This one actually was supported by $1 million CAI grant. It was actually seed money to get the program started, but there have been, I believe it's considerable amount of graduations since, approximately 40. And this is actually, it started with just the San Joaquin Delta College as the local education agency, but since there are 2 more iterations of the program. These programs, these nursing programs, especially the one in Riverside County that was really meant for the rural areas, create diversity for all sorts of people. They are able to access these various communities. And also, these people actually the apprentices go to school 20 hours and they work 20 hours. So, this is a tough program to get through to become a nurse unless they have a unique opportunity like apprenticeship. So this is something that came about, and we're very proud of that. Sarah and Begin might even mention that as we move forward. SEIU Local 1000 DAS have been considerably invested in that. Also, just another model here, the Launch Early Childhood Educator Apprenticeship Program is a good example of how county, city entities can come together for a program, and it could be multi-employer. These actually do share the same local education agency. It's 24 to 30 months time for the apprenticeship. This one is a competency-based program with RSI with a related and supplemental instruction of approximately 600 to 900 hours. This is for the master teacher, the school site supervisor, and the teacher occupations. But again, it's just mainly an example of how these employers could come together to really serve their communities and create diversity and opportunity that otherwise wouldn't be available through apprenticeship. Some of the examples of related supplemental instruction include, this one, for example, is from our information security analyst occupation, 52 hours of firewalls, ethical hacking and network defense, 87 hours. It's all broken down into what they're going to learn over what period of time. And so they're actually able to receive these tasks and educational components that are directed specifically for that occupation. And then to the competencies, these are actually demonstrated. So typically it's something like they assist in developing security policies and protocols or enforcing company compliances. These are measurable things that they can actually, they're decided typically, the demonstration of those is decided typically by the management in those areas. So that it actually meets the employer requirements. I'm going to hand it back to Kelly. It was just a short little overview, nuts and bolts. Thank you so much.
The benefits to employers are significant, as you can see. I won't read through each of the bullets, but they are wide-ranging, which includes a sense of loyalty, trust, and confidence, and that really translates into retention. We have strong statistical data that suggests that apprenticeship programs actually see a stronger retention than those where you're just hiring off the street or some other type of training program. The access to funding is also significant for employers, and the ability to really customize the training and tailor it specifically to your organization is also a strong selling point. The benefits, I think we need to go back one slide. Sorry, the benefits to our academic partners also have a far-reaching application, and they include the ability to partner with the employer. It creates a funding potential where the employer and the local education agency come together to access those funds. It also creates a stronger linkage with industry. Many of our academic partners have internships, but they are not robust, and they don't see the placement rates that you see with registered apprenticeship. And then leveraging the resources of the state of California, specifically our strategic business consultants who can help develop these programs, is another incentive. The benefits to the apprentices are also equally important. I think I outlined some of those on a prior slide, but again, alignment with a degree track, a bridge between the industry and academia. Many instances, you've got kids that are in school, going to college, and then move into their registered apprenticeship program while they're securing their degree. The significant wage opportunities are also a game changer. They develop lifelong skills. And at the end of the registered apprenticeship program, it affords them the ability to secure a credential and a full-time job. Again, that portable credential is recognized by both the state and the U.S. Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship. And in the case of incumbent workers, it affords those individuals the ability to upskill and move into higher paying in-demand roles. Here is a snapshot and a sampling of some examples of folks who are a part of the registered apprenticeship model from a leadership perspective. They include IBM and our former California CIO, Amy Tong, who was an integral part of the development of our mainframe systems administration apprenticeship program that was developed in collaboration with IBM. Dr. Hart, the president of Loma Linda University Health, was a part of our IT cybersecurity consortium, which saw the partnerships of many employers in the Inland Empire region. And then finally, David Casey, who is a senior vice president of workforce at CVS Health, who currently has a very robust registered apprenticeship program focusing on pharmacy technician. Return on investment. For every dollar that an employer invests in a registered apprenticeship program, they see a return of almost $1.50, according to the U.S. Department of Labor. The return on investment, again, has a far-reaching application. It goes beyond just those initial stakeholders. For every dollar that the government invests in registered apprenticeship, they see a return of $28. The stronger outcomes extend to other types of data as well, and that includes the percentage of apprentices who are employed after completing their certification training through a registered apprenticeship program. And I'd also like to add that that retention extends to a 5-year period of time where they still are with that same employer. And then finally, on average, those apprentices who complete a registered apprenticeship program on average earn about $300,000 more over the course of their lifetime versus their counterparts who did not go through a registered apprenticeship program. Let's talk funding. As I mentioned on a prior slide, there are significant advantages for employers and other stakeholders who are developing, deploying, and maintaining and ideally scaling registered apprenticeship programs. They start, first of all, with grant funding. We were very fortunate to be awarded from the Biden administration a $10 million grant. It was built around workforce investment boards partnering with employers in their respective region. Maybe Carrie can talk a little bit about the partnership that they have with the Workforce Investment Board. They were awarded one of those grants, and they are now going to be able to work with employers in their regions to develop registered apprenticeship programs. This affords those employers, by extension, a sub-grantee funding mechanism that can help support that infrastructure. California Apprenticeship Initiative grants are a line item in our budget. They're funded to the tune of $15 million on an annual basis. They come out in the form of 2 to 3 rounds per year. They are designed to provide seed money for the deployment of new innovative registered apprenticeship programs focusing on these sectors and roles that I talked about. The employment training panel is something I mentioned previously. Related and supplemental instruction is another funding mechanism unique to California. It's a line item in our budget. It's administered by the California Community College Chancellor's Office. It comes in the form of hours that are distributed to local education agencies who partner with employers, and it helps to fund uncovered RSI costs. Speaking of RSI costs, the good news is that if in fact your apprenticeship program is tied to a community college, there is something called FTE or apportionment, which effectively means that any student that is enrolled in a community college class that is tied to a registered apprenticeship model does not have to pay the cost of that particular class, and nor does the employer. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, WIOA dollars, very common for many of our employers to develop linkages with their local WIBs to tap into WIOA when targeting those specific populations. And then high road training partnerships is also something that is very specific to the types of efforts that can be bridged through a registered apprenticeship model. It's built around the morals that we care about in California, and that is good paying, high quality jobs that lead to middle class attainment, climate mitigation strategies, and an ethical approach to affording workers the opportunity to move up so they can provide for themselves and their families. Federal grants come in the form of our U.S. Department of Labor partnerships. They are significant, and increasingly, many of our employers are enjoying funding opportunities that have been funneled in from the DOL to the state of California to support the infrastructure. California Apprenticeship Initiative Grant, again, is another one that I referenced a little bit earlier, and that those two can be complemented. Philanthropic organizations are also heavily invested in registered apprenticeships. And then finally, something that's currently before the subcommittees that are focusing on this year's budget that we're excited about. It's currently proposed, but it is formula funding, which is very different. It is not a competitive process. If it were to be signed into the governor's budget, it would basically create a formula mechanism by which employers can claim a reimbursement for every single registered apprenticeship or every single registered apprentice that they have. They would enter into annual contracts to secure those dollars. So the solution, we think, is the registered apprenticeship model. It brings very specific relief to a lot of the murky issues that I think a lot of your HR shops are struggling with. And that is, how do we find talent? How do we train talent? And how do we, most importantly, retain that same talent? I am very confident that when you learn more beyond that which we've discussed today about the registered apprenticeship model, its return on investment, and the significant opportunities afforded to employers throughout the state, including our public sector entities, you're going to take a second look about why and how this model can benefit your organization. It is very clear to the administration that in order to accomplish this really robust, audacious, ambitious goal of our governor to secure 500,000 registered apprentices over the next 8 years, it is not going to happen without engaging and effectively incorporating a registered apprenticeship model into some of our largest employers, which are our public sector entities. We have field offices located throughout the state of California. So if you are a public sector entity in Redlands, California, or one all the way up against the Oregon border, we have a strike team of subject matter experts who can partner with you to help you develop your model. And then lastly, on behalf of myself and Laura Thompson, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm looking forward to being a part of the panel and hearing from you about what your needs are, and we look forward to a continued dialogue. Thank you.
Excellent. Kelly and Laura, thank you so much for all of that information. There was a lot of information, and hopefully you all found it informative, and I think we're all still probably digesting it a little bit. As I've noted in the chat, we really want to start our Q&A and our panel conversation with some basic questions just about the program. We've heard a lot. There's a lot of detail in here. We got a couple questions in the chat about the content. As mentioned, we will actually share the recording of this session as well as all the materials, including these presentations, with you electronically so that you can spend even more time with them, read all of the notes in there, even get the acronyms down if you don't have them all. There are a number of acronyms, and we want to be sensitive to that. And we're so excited that you've got a little bit of the basics on what the apprenticeships program is. Some of the questions that have come through have been related to just how do you learn more? And one thing, Kelly and Laura, that we heard is that there's a lot of interest in the fact that this is the maybe non-traditional job classifications. And let's talk a little bit about those classifications. There's quite a few, I think, outside of what we would traditionally think of in the context of apprenticeships. Talk about some of the classifications again that were appropriate and are appropriate for this program, maybe outside of the scope of what people might have originally thought. And then if there is a list of all of those classifications that you can share or point us to, we'd love that as well.
Thank you so much, Erica. So I'll give you some examples of what we've done at the state of California. We have registered apprenticeship occupational tracks in IT roles ranging from help desk to networking, mainframe systems administration, software engineer, application developer, and cybersecurity specialist, which is our most recent. For those of you who may or may not be aware, we've got a significant shortage of cyber roles across California, including both the public and private sector, and our public sector entities are really struggling to fill those roles. We also have financial services roles that include taxation and accounting. We have, as Laura talked about, our LVN to RN registered apprenticeship roles. So focusing and leaning in on allied healthcare occupations seems to be another area that I think could be a potential for growth. We're also exploring some new roles like industrial hygienists, for example. The good news is that the registered apprenticeship model fits everywhere. And so whatever is a challenge for you within your organization with respect to filling these roles, the registered apprenticeship model can meet that challenge.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Kelly. And so I think you've answered this. The master list, it exists or not exactly?
So we can certainly provide you with different opportunities. And the reality is you may have some roles that we have yet to even establish. The one thing that I will say is that we have a mechanism on our public website that allows individuals, organizations to go in and search for different types of apprenticeship programs. Not all of them are listed there because we give the employer the option of being searchable. And so please do not rely solely on that. Work with us and we can work with you on identifying what your specific operational needs are.
Perfect. Thank you. In the interest of time, and because some of the questions that are coming in are actually mixing up some of the panelist expertise, I want to go ahead and bring on our other two panelists. Thank you so much to the DIR team for the information we've gotten so far. I definitely want to make sure that we also hear and introduce officially Carrie and Sarah. Carrie and Sarah, please go ahead and turn your cameras on and I can introduce you. And then you can also certainly answer questions as they come in to you as they connect to the work that you've done. So Carrie Harmon, she currently serves as the Assistant Director of Housing and Workforce Solutions for Riverside County. And that's where she's responsible for moving the county's housing, anti-poverty, and workforce development initiatives forward. She has over 20 years of experience in community and economic development, and she's really started her career as an AmeriCorps volunteer. So that really rounds out a lot of what we're working for today. Sarah McGinn is with SEIU Local 1000. She's bringing a union perspective to our conversation today, and she is the apprenticeship coordinator for SEIU Local 1000. She has served in that capacity since the union launched its first innovative apprenticeship program in 2016. So Sarah has worked with a lot of state departments and local education agency partners to develop up to 7 registered apprenticeship programs. And those are targeting some of the non-traditional occupations like we were just talking about. And so we definitely want to hear from both Sarah and Carrie about how to do this, how to implement this, because some of the questions we're getting are about the nuts and bolts, right? Not only just the what is it, but how do we do it? And so we're going to dig a little bit into that with our next set of questions. So thank you all for joining, and let's go to that Q&A slide. Hopefully you're all up, and let me just dive right into the questions. Here's a question. Can nonprofits become registered apprentice and pre-apprentice programs? Do you know about that, DIR team? And what are about areas like mental health, peer counseling, general, grocery, other service types? Do you know if those classifications also count?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear the first part of the question, Erica.
Yeah, it's actually unrelated to public sector. It's actually related to nonprofits and whether or not
I can answer that.
Tie into this. Yeah.
The answer is yes. Nonprofits can serve as a program sponsor or pre-apprenticeship provider. The one caveat that we have with registered apprenticeship is that registered pre-apprenticeships rather, and I think Laura talked about it, is that a registered pre-apprenticeship must be linked with a registered apprenticeship program in order to be eligible. But nonprofits absolutely can serve in that capacity.
Excellent. Great. And then let's talk a little bit about, since we have the full team on the line, let's talk about why this is important for local governments, why they should consider it, given that there's a lot happening in the sector, there's a lot happening, and there's a lot of work to be done. As we've talked about, so many of our current employees are already overloaded. Can we talk a little bit about why this is relevant, why this is important, before we dive into the specifics? Because there's some complexity around the program, and certainly there would need to be an investment, but you think it's worthwhile. Can we talk through that?
I can jump in there and tackle that from a local board and workforce perspective. We think apprenticeships are worthwhile for the fact that it can be a major tool in creating a more diverse and equitable workforce. I think that also it's a way, I'm from the Inland Empire region. We have a lower level of educational attainment. I think it's a way of, one, linking someone to a job, but also promoting pathways to higher education starting at the AA or just certification level and moving up to a bachelor's degree. I think it's also an important way that we can connect with some residents and some communities that we haven't connected with before in a more purposeful way and as an employer. So that's what we were looking for when we started our very small program.
And Carrie, since you're already speaking, why don't you give us the elevator pitch on work that you've done in Riverside County? Can you just give everyone a high level so they understand the perspective that you're sharing with us today?
Absolutely. So we just started launching a cybersecurity apprenticeship program at Riverside County in collaboration with our IT department. This is new to them. They aren't traditionally apprenticed occupations, and it was for two reasons. One, that we have a shortage of cybersecurity qualified experts and technicians across the state. So we're working with the state and with Kelly's team to skill up that workforce. But we also had some entry-level IT workers at the county who were interested in and could benefit from incumbent worker training. So our program is being approached and scoped from the incumbent worker perspective. And I just want to put a plug in for Riverside County because in Kelly's presentation, she did note our nursing program. Laura touched on our nursing program, also the launch program with early childhood education. I think there is a ecosystem and a desire within the region to deploy apprenticeships as our approach to workforce.
Excellent. Thank you, Carrie. And then if I can, let's have our representative from SEIU. Let's talk a little bit about what your role is here and how you're feeling about this.
Yeah, thank you. So my role at Local 1000 really started when we launched our first apprenticeship program with the assistance of Kelly and Laura, and then Helen Dowden, who's in the chat actually, but was really as a success coordinator to support apprentices while they progress through the program. Since there, we've expanded tremendously with the 7 apprenticeships now, including the nursing program in Riverside, 3 other nursing programs, cybersecurity, financial services, mainframe administrator, and I think we have an IT help desk networking. So lots of different areas in civil service and in innovative apprenticeship. And as Local 1000, I think we see the value in that these programs provide a real meaningful growth for our members. We really see a huge impact in their skills and then what they ultimately earn as a result. Similarly, they don't have to leave the workforce to do this. So while somebody may have, entered the workforce at a young age and done entry-level work and had not had the opportunity to return to improve their skills or maybe seek out the career they really wanted, apprenticeship provides that opportunity for people while they continue to earn a living. And it removes that financial barrier they might have otherwise leaving the workforce. So we see it as a real win for our members and also for civil service, to have, to be able to provide the civil service and public sector with these good skills that are developed in apprenticeship. So
thank you for that. And I'm actually going to piggyback to you again, because what's interesting to me, and I certainly had this perspective when I learned about this program, was this perception, and it was a misconception on my part, I think, the viewpoint that unions could maybe create barriers to this kind of program. And certainly your participation today speaks volumes about that, because I think there is a role that unions can play in creating and supporting this program. And certainly what you've done, as you've mentioned, with certain classifications has been really, really innovative. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about what role you played specifically in sort of helping the local agencies build up their talent.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think I had heard that as well, that maybe unions can be barriers. It's not been my experience as in our union. I feel like I often say I have the best job in the union because the work we do with management is so collaborative, and it's really a unique engagement in that respect, that we're not, at the bargaining table negotiating, we're actually building something together. And I think also it's, working with a union is really working with your workforce, is working with your employees who know the job, they know they want to help build this and grow the workforce. And so I think you end up with a product at the end that is is easily adopted by workers, that they have, you have the union seal of approval, so to speak. So I think that's definitely one benefit. And then also the union, we do have resources and funding. So at Local 1000, we have hired success coordinators that serve to help assist the apprentices through the program. So any kind of personal, academic, or professional issue, they're there to help support that and resolve and help determine individualized solutions.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate the candid answer. And certainly as we work to figure out what are the solutions that work for local government, given that there is some traditional complications around this, I think that perspective is really helpful, and I'm grateful to you for bringing it. So if we talk nuts and bolts, I'd love to hear from a couple of you about how long it will take someone to get an apprenticeships program in place so that they can kind of embed it and deploy. Like, what is the timeline? What are the timelines? What does this look like? How does it work from beginning to end? And maybe just give kind of a roadmap so that those of us that haven't done this, don't know what it looks like, what the timeframes are. Walk us through the step by step and maybe the approximate timeframes. And that, I'm thinking that would go to one DIR team. And maybe if you've done this in Riverside County, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a great question. And I think during my presentation, I talked about how we have taken great care to really streamline that process to ensure deployment is within a fairly reasonable amount of time. The vast majority of our registered apprenticeship programs, and that includes our public sector development work, are deployed within 90 days. We do have a 30-day posting requirement. Typically, with our public sector entities, the first thing we do is we have a meeting with labor relations, and typically it's like an IT shop or a subject matter expert group who can really talk about and identify some of their challenges, the specific roles that they're interested in. Invariably, we are fortunate, as Sarah talked about, we are partners in this process, and to bring in our union brothers and sisters to really help bring all of those different stakeholders together to develop a program. We formulate a work group, which ultimately morphs into a joint apprenticeship committee, because it's a joint labor management program in most cases, not all, but most. And then we get to work on developing standards and rules and regulations that govern the joint apprenticeship committee. The joint apprenticeship committee is a very valuable complement to the apprenticeship standards and the program itself, because it really allows for oversight and ensuring that apprentices are getting what they need, the organization's needs are being met, and that you can continue to take a look at that program, augment it where necessary, and build and expand on it where appropriate. Once the standards are developed, they go to us for review. We will also bring in our counterpart at the U.S. Department of Labor. As I mentioned earlier, the vast majority of our registered apprenticeship programs are duly registered. And so we work shoulder to shoulder with them to make sure that they're also meeting federal compliance requirements. And then they're submitted for a program review to post on our website for 30 days. Upon that 30 days, they are then rerouted to our chief for signature, and then we're off to the races. And that's when the magic happens. And that's when we start building out an infrastructure to help our public sector entities get the skilled workforce they need.
Great, thank you. And I think there's a couple questions in the chat as well about just clarifying again the technical occupations, right? So there's a question in here: are apprenticeship programs only for more technical occupations? Are there apprenticeship programs for more generalist occupations like staff or management analysts? And I think we've heard that answer, but let's just clarify it one more time.
Yeah, and I think Sarah can speak to that about what we're currently working on.
Yeah, so I would say definitely we're aiming to launch a apprenticeship that targets like a staff services analyst occupation. And I think, looking at apprenticeship, perhaps it seems suitable for almost every occupation that requires some duration of time to learn the job. So I think it's 6 months is kind of a minimum, and then some type of related and supplemental instruction. So at least when I think about developing an apprenticeship, that's what I look at, is like, what is this a kind of robust program that needs some time to develop, or is it a 6-week certificate, or is it kind of a career occupation? And so that's kind of how I look at that. But that is something we're aiming for, and ultimately perhaps looking at an associate government program analyst as well. So
great, thank you for that. I want to make sure that there's real clarity among the attendees today about the support that's available to pull all of this together. And I want to make sure that we've already clarified that. So I'm hearing you say, Laura, there is lots of support available for setting up a program. All that a local agency at this time needs to do is say, I'm interested, I want to know more, and then they can contact us and we can connect them to all these resources related to how do you move forward for your agency. Do I have that correct, Laura and team?
I think the first thing to do, to be honest with you, because Kelly is the state-wide regional director for the non-traditional partnerships, it would be best to reach out to her at the email that's given, and then she can go ahead and designate. But yes, there is a consultant for each program, and so we'll take them through the process and determine which other stakeholders, or they could tell us which other stakeholders will need to be at the table, and we could help facilitate that. That program coming together. So, and then too, as far as registering the program, then we could take them through that process. But there is support for that, and it's just a matter of getting the ball rolling. But yeah, definitely reach out to Kelly, and then from there we can make sure that you have the people in your area that can help you best.
Excellent, wonderful. And I'd love to hear a little bit from Riverside County, because I know that you're kind of connecting this program to a number of your goals. And one of the things we talked about, and we referenced it, and it's open to all the panelists, but we've heard that some of the challenges related to attraction and retention are definitely related to our goals around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And thinking about this program as an opportunity to address some of those challenges and to maybe make some headway there. Can any of you talk about how this could be utilized to accomplish that, and what some of those key elements might be?
So as we imagine the program built out and on a larger scale, I think it is, as I mentioned earlier, a real tool to diversify our IT workforce, and hopefully that diversification will spill out into the larger community. We know that women, people of color are not well represented within the IT industry across, I think, across the United States. I also think that it is an industry where if you're the first person in your family to venture out into IT and to carve a career pathway, that there is some social capital and also some knowledge that's transmitted. And I speak from, I am the daughter of teachers. There's 6 of us. It's 3 of us, not myself, but 3 are in the education field. And so a lot of that is the information that's passed on at home. And so what I'm hoping for from the perspective of the workforce director is, as more people join that IT career ladder, will it help others within families join that ladder? Will it help people spread the word within their friends and family that that is a viable career that anybody can get into? You don't have to have a college degree. I think that's one of the great things about the IT occupations and the entry level, is that it just requires some certifications initially, and then it's endless where you can grow with that up to the management ranks, but also up to very technical expertise. And I think it's also a way to get youth involved. There's some, young people have a definite desire and are just come out more skilled in that than some of us are older folks. So that is what I'm hoping that we will, achieve as we further develop this apprenticeship model, starting with cybersecurity. I also think it provides an earn to learn opportunity. So folks that can't leave to obtain certifications can receive, their full paycheck while they're learning. So those are some of the benefits we're definitely interested in, and seeing that sector grow even outside of Riverside County within the inland region.
Thanks so much for that. We've gotten a couple of questions just for additional clarity about funding. So I want to make sure that we're really clear about funding available. And I know that the DIR team gave a slide that kind of highlighted a couple potential sources of funding for a program like this if you were to implement it in your agency. I think there's additional questions even about planning for this and just sort of the setup required. Can you guys talk a little bit about what funding is available? Do you pay to have assistance with even the setup for any of the consultations? Where does the payment begin, and what funding is available to help assist with getting off the ground and moving it forward?
Yeah, thank you, Erica. So there are a myriad of funding opportunities. The vast majority of those funding opportunities come in the form of competitive grants. However, there are other funding streams, like I mentioned, related and supplemental instruction dollars, and hopefully, fingers crossed, in this upcoming budget, a formula funding structure around the apprenticeship innovation funding. One of the things you touched on a little bit, and I wanted to sort of dovetails into this question about supportive services. Those supportive services that are provided by us, they're consultancy services free of charge that allow for us to do a lot of that heavy lifting for you in the development of the standards, really building up your apprenticeship program. But one of the things that may have crossed your mind is how you can leverage partnerships that you may have to really help support that. And that really is where an intermediary can come in. Currently, Riverside County has a partnership with an intermediary that they work with, but there are some entities that are a natural fit to be able to facilitate that kind of work and can really relieve you of a lot of the traditional administrative oversight of the program. And so as we've begun to explore development of our public sector apprenticeship programs across the state, we've been thinking about an infrastructure that would really lend to create a lift and shift model. And so when you hopefully reach out to us, we'll be talking to you about some of the ideas that we have that I think will minimize your responsibility to really do the day-to-day stuff and really allow for you to partner with other entities that can help provide supportive services, whether it's funding, administrative, outreach, recruitment, among other things.
Fantastic, thank you. So we've talked a little bit about, the timelines for the program, how long it takes to get up and running. We've talked about funding for the program. We've talked about how it might help support things like diversity, equity, inclusion. Certainly there are large issues to tackle. And what we haven't really talked about is how to move this forward within your organization, how to connect the dots with all the leadership structures that exist and with all of the potential stakeholders that might need to be at the table to have this conversation in a meaningful way. And I saw a question in the Q&A that was really interesting. It said, and this is an operational question a little bit, but that's going to dovetail into one about who needs to be at the table. This is a question that says, how can we improve our ability as local agencies to utilize apprenticeship programs when they are so different from our normal HR practices? That's a good question. And it's something that I think would resonate with some others on the line that are thinking, how do we do this? It's so different than our day-to-day. It feels like it's onerous. For our panelists, what would you say to that?
I'm going to tackle that one because that has been a subject when we're getting ours off the ground. One, I just want to say off the bat that I am here because an email announcing this opportunity came to our assistant county CEO. And, Juan Perez is his name. He, not knowing, just saw an opportunity from a state and said, let's go. And so while at the workforce level, we might have, been more, can we do this during the pandemic? Do we have the staff resources? All of those traditional questions we go through. our assistant CEO just said, go for it and make it happen. And that empowered both myself on the workforce side in putting it together, but also empowered the director of the IT department, who saw this as, you know, a new program and a new initiative that was being directed by the executive office. So I can't stress how important that really high level vetting and saying, run with it, we're going to do something new, helped get our program off the ground. And then I think you have to be comfortable with having those conversations about it is going to be more work, but changing systems takes work. And I think at the local government level, we just need to kind of give into the work, right? It is going to be new. It is going to be more on our to-do list for the first probably 1 to 2 years, but the return on investment, I think, is worth it. And if you commit to that 2-year period to get something, to get its legs, I think it will get us where we want to go, and we shouldn't be afraid of that at the local level.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think there's definitely, as we talk about things like, you know, retention strategies and recruitment strategies, it definitely comes hand in hand. And these models, I think, are intended to be for both. Can we talk a little bit about that again? Because I think we're talking about two different things. On the one end, we're talking about incumbent workers and leveraging this program to kind of upskill them, and that makes a ton of sense. Can we talk a little bit more and clarify a little bit more about the opportunities for the other end, for those that are as a recruitment strategy? Can you guys give a little clarity on the recruitment elements attached to the apprenticeships, just to make sure we're articulating it correctly and that there's clarity around whether this is for new or just existing and incumbent employees?
Well, I can speak on behalf of Local 1000 that the programs that we partner with in the state presently are for incumbent employees, and that's kind of due to some mechanisms with the state, training and development assignment mechanisms. But I think that ultimately the idea is to do a type of a hybrid cohort where we have new hires coming in, we have incumbent workers, and there's a large applicant pool and pipeline. You know, with one of the things, you know, that I think we lend as a union to the programs is we're organized labor, so we're organized and we have a lot of structures and networks in place to kind of recruit, to let people know about opportunities that are present. But again, our programs are presently limited to incumbent employees, but I think there's room for both. And I think at the local level, it's probably a bit easier to get that underway, to get new hires involved. And Kelly might want to speak to that.
Yeah, it is. And it varies depending upon the local government, but I've had an opportunity to engage with a number of them. And for us, it's really about digging in and understanding the mechanism by which you can, within your current infrastructure, move someone into a temporary training capacity. And I have, whether it's Alameda County, San Diego, even Sacramento, I've been able to get a better understanding about how that infrastructure can work. And it is a lot more flexible than at the state, although we're seeking to address that. We recognize that local governments not only want to afford opportunities to upskill their existing incumbent workers, but they want to bring new individuals into the public sector fold. And I think within the local government system itself, whether you're a city or a municipality or a special district, there is a lot more flexibility to do that. There are some local governments, for example, that have universal apprenticeship classifications that allow for somebody to be hired within a targeted class, but serve in a training capacity. So that's part of where our strategic business consultants can come in and work with you and learn a lot more about exploring what's possible based on the way your infrastructure works specifically.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I think that clarity is really important because, we are looking at a multi-pronged approach to dealing with what we're finding is an unprecedented workforce challenge across so much of local government. And there are questions in our Q&A about how do we recruit employees? How do we retain? I mean, this predicament is far reaching, and we need all the tools in the toolbox. So I do appreciate the clarity there, and certainly the forward looking approach. Right, local governments, it sounds like, have a lot more flexibility than the state to potentially bring on not only the existing employees but also the new and potentially potential employees. But we also have other flexibility to consider, and you have the guidance at the state, and there are other partners that can bring on some insights and that sound like they're customized for the local agency. And so that first conversation around the intentions and the goals and maybe the classifications will be sort of the first step to figuring out what can be done and in what time frame, and then what potential funding is available to support rollout and implementation. So we're going to move into wrap up, but before we do that, I really want to ask all the panelists to give us any parting thoughts around this effort. And certainly I want to acknowledge that there are a couple more questions in the chat and the Q&A that I invite our panelists to write answers to while we're in wrap up, so that we can complete as many of those as we can. But I also want to give the panelists a chance to each say one or two things as we're concluding this conversation. What do you want everyone to take away today? What do you want them to remember? And certainly we'll make sure to share contact information, but what are some key things you think are relevant from your point of view about apprenticeships for the local government sector? Maybe we'll start with Sarah.
Yeah, that's a great question. From a union perspective, we look at public sector workforce is really there to serve the public and make sure that local communities are healthy and safe and thriving. And so we really see that apprenticeship is a tool that works towards this end. It allows people to increase their income without leaving the workforce. And it really has a positive economic impact on not only the apprentice, but their communities. And just as a parting example, our LVN to RN apprenticeship program, it's a one-year apprenticeship program. Apprentices go into that program making maybe $60,000 a year, and when they graduate a year later and are promoted, they make about $110,000. So it's really life-changing, and I think that's why we support it, and I think that's why government should also support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. What about Laura?
Oh, thank you. I know that apprenticeship isn't easy to understand. There are a lot of moving parts to it, and there are a lot of stakeholders at the table to make this happen, but it is an incredibly innovative, amazing way to change lives across our not just our state, but really hopefully, we do have the DOL involved, and we're seeing that there are, these innovative apprenticeships expanding into the different states. I just think it's a way of the future. And it really is a 21st century solution to our workforce needs. And I know that I would like to provide even more information, more education about that, because I think that in itself helps people make this decision. So please reach out to us and feel free to ask any questions that you have, because I think the more you understand it, the easier it will be to know how it will work for you.
Thank you, Lori. Carrie.
I think my parting thoughts, and I can't agree with Laura more, I do believe that this is the workforce solution of the future, and we're going to see a lot more of apprenticeships. I would encourage my colleagues at the local level to be patient with developing the relationships in the early stages. That's part of the work. The state team has been remarkable, and we also have worked with the intermediary, which has been very helpful. I would also encourage my colleagues at the local level to not just look for, although we have been a recipient recently of the CAI apprenticeship grant to do this work, don't just look for the funding or follow a specific grant to launch it. Look for all available funding, whether it's WIOA locally, your local human resources funding and special projects that they're launching, and just go out there, take the risk, because I do believe it's going to be worth it.
Awesome. And then Kelly, I think you're the last one before we go into our wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's just a question that I would pose of the individuals that are on the phone is what you're doing currently working? And if it's not, why not try something different? We have a lot of strong testimonials that suggest the integration of a registered apprenticeship program gets you that 21st century skilled workforce. And that includes our public sector partners. I think for our goal is, above everything else, is to provide you services that are free of charge, that don't cost you anything, and that can do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. And also, finally, to amplify the great work that you're doing. Many of the rollouts that we do with our partnerships involve communication strategies with press releases and big events. So that really gets out to the community, the investment that you're making, but it also opens up opportunities to really amplify and give information to individuals within your respective region who may not know about the program. So use the might of the state of California on all of these different levels to help you be successful in your recruitment and retention strategies.
I love that. Thank you, Kelly. And I want to add a couple things just from the perspective of ILG as the Institute for Local Government, because we brought this session together because we are looking for solutions for a problem that we know are plaguing so many cities, counties, and special districts up and down the state. And we want to help you get there. We want to help you figure out how to solve this. And like I said, bring tools to your toolbox. So while we're wrapping up, if you have any comments you want to make in the chat around what are some of the struggles like that you're hearing as it relates to this program, or others that you would like us to make sure that we're trying to address as ILG, things that we can do to bring you all together to share information with your colleagues, with your cohort across the state, other people in your positions. How can we help move this needle with you? We certainly are going to connect you to those of you that are interested. We will connect you to the apprenticeships team that's on the line today. And certainly you've heard the commitment from everyone on the line that there is interest in hearing what your interest is and figuring out if the solution works for you and how to customize it for your region. And we want to know what additional things would be useful for you as you are on this journey. So as we move into wrap up, just a couple quick updates for you about what's coming next, and make sure you get our contact information. Next slide, please, Seth. So we have another webinar tomorrow, unrelated, but we've got a lot of upcoming webinars, and we want to make sure you know that in addition to this one, including all the materials that we've already provided on this, the presentation will be available as an attachment, and we'll also get you the recording. We have a number of upcoming webinars, and we make sure to provide the recordings, and if there are materials, we give those to you as well for all of them. Here's a couple that are coming up. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about wildfire preparedness and prevention, so if that's on your radar, as it is for so many communities, please do tune in tomorrow at 10:30. And then shortly after that, the following week, we've got session 3 of our cultural intelligence series, very closely connected to workforce development as you think about how do you retain and attract employees that want a diverse workforce, that want to have an equitable approach to their community. This is a great session to get you on that track, and it is free to participate. And then the next slide speaks about another one tying a little bit more to this HR conversation, managing difficult conversations with constituents and colleagues. We have heard that polarization and just challenging communication has really complicated the dynamic within workplaces, and it's causing people to leave or not want to work in local government. How do we minimize that? Learn from us and our colleagues at Braver Angels on Wednesday, July 13th. We've got an interactive workshop to help you work through it, literally practice those skills, and we would love to have you join us for managing difficult conversations. Next slide. We hope that you are already on our newsletter and our mailing list and our social handles. If you're not, that's the best way to find out about what we have coming and to find out about opportunities we have to partner with people like the state agencies that you have on the line, other colleagues doing similar things and struggles. We want to share those. We have lots of cohorts. We'd love to have you on our contact information, share our contact information with your colleagues, and be a part of our mailing list. Next slide. And as I mentioned, this recording, I think it'll be available within the next week or so, maybe sooner, but we'll make sure to let you know when it's available to everyone. And you can forward that on to your colleagues, friends, and others that are interested in this topic. Next slide. This is the contact information for our panelists. We'll leave that on the screen for a second. Know that when I send it out to you, you'll get that as well, but you'll be able to reach any of us. And certainly we want to stay connected to this work. We want to make sure you're connected to this work and that you have answers to all of your questions. The panelists should be typing in answers if we can to the questions still in the chat, but we will certainly be available for emails after the fact. Next slide. and we would love to work with you at ILG. So we can certainly be a hub for you to connect you to this issue and others. We have 4 pillars of work, and workforce is a big part of certainly our priorities and our key values around building local government, helping it grow and be as successful as possible. We want to know how we can help you on this issue and others. We'd love to work with you on a number of projects tied to the pillars of work that we focus on. And next slide. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your energy and being candid with us about a program that I think has a lot of potential. And certainly we all want to find solutions, and this could be one for some of these agencies. So we are grateful for the insight you provided, the guidance you provided, and hopefully we'll hear more from you all both on the line and behind the scenes. Next slide. And for the rest of you that are participating either in the recording and that have attended live today, thank you so much for joining us. This was such an informative session, certainly for me, certainly for the ILG team, but hopefully for you. And we do really want to help make local government as productive as possible, given the challenges we've all faced over the last 2 years and more. We know that it is not going to be easy, but we are grateful for all the work that you do. We are proud of the work that you do, and we want to help you continue to do it well. On behalf of everyone at ILG and certainly the panel today, we want to thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.